Welcome, I'm Patrick Foley from Longwater Tai Chi, and this is another Stay Connected video. Today I'd like to talk a little bit about practicing and integrating in some of the material that we've already put up on the Stay Connected series. We have some very interesting little separate components that have already been put up, and soon I'll also be putting up a fresh version of the Foundation 24-step back view with instructions which will help in your practice. But today I want to just talk a little bit about how you focus on those little components that we put together. So we've already done things like the 5 words of composure, and they're really, really important for creating that settling in the body prior to doing your Tai Chi practice. We've talked a little bit about breath and connecting the body up in commencement. And we've also looked at, for instance, in the last video, the construction of the stance and the bow stance. And this is very important in knowing the direction that you're heading in and the type of stance that you're using in that direction. So all of these things can be studied separately and then integrated slowly into your form. And I'd quite like to see all of you spending a little bit more time on focusing on these individual components. So, for example, when we start our form, if we do our practice of our form, we can just step out, do our form a few times, move on to the next thing. Or when we step out, we can actually really spend some time on the 5 words and really focus on how we integrate those 5 words into creating a really settled, strong structure in our bodies, ready for Tai Chi movement. And then we might one day, perhaps, having established this, go on to find out ways of how we continue to keep the 5 words in our minds as we go from posture to posture. So I might just set myself straight into the part horse's main structure and then go through the 5 words to see if I can find ways of really settling through my body, dropping gravity through all the center lines of the body, really connecting with a root, finding out where my lower dantian is with respect to my center. And then just stand there for a little while settling into that, and then try that same thing again in another movement, perhaps the next movement in the form. White crane spreads its wings. Put yourself in the posture, then find out through the 5 words, how do you settle into that posture and really create structure. And give yourself a few minutes in each posture, just exploring the 5 words. You can actually go through the whole form like this, and it would be a really, really good study, a good practice session to do that. We also talked about the phases of the stance and breath in commencement, for instance. You can just use the exercise that we did following the breath up the back and down the front in commencement, but then you can bring that into the rest of the form and just see how you could keep your breath going as you go through all the movements of the form. Okay. Then as we step, what am I stepping into? Am I stepping into a standard bow stance? Am I stepping into a wide bow stance, a narrow bow stance? And what direction am I traveling in? So having studied or practiced the construction of the stance, the properties of the stance separately, we can then have a look at how they fit together in the form. So that having, for instance, stepped out, done our 5 words practice, and done our commencement and gone into the movement of the form, I would already be starting to think, well, what am I doing now and where am I going? Well, I'm doing part wild horse's mane, so I know that I would have already had to set this right foot at a correct angle so that I can step out a little bit wider. And what direction am I traveling in? Well, I'm traveling towards the left wall. So I must make sure that all the angles of my feet are correct for that direction of travel. And then I can check that I've done that. Or have I accidentally gone into a standard bow stance? Or worse still, into a narrow bow stance, trying to do my part horse's mane here. This is a very unstable place for this posture. I really need to be here in this posture, already settled in it. And I can go through the whole form like this as well, testing each posture, being really clear about which direction I'm going in, and whether I've got a stance that supports that. So quite soon, I'm going to also be introducing the phases of the stance, which is a really, really important component. Some of you have already studied this, but nobody, including myself, really can do this well. Not yet. So it requires a lot of practice. The phases of the stance are a very important component in practicing our Taijiquan. And so I'll be uploading that video fairly soon. And I'd like you to look at that again as a separate practice, which then can be eventually or bit by bit added in to your standard practice of the form. So to finish off, just remember to really pay attention to these components. Study them in a bit more detail than perhaps you're doing at the moment. Don't just do your form. You have time. So spend a little bit more time working at the details. Okay, the devil's in the details, and it's a good devil in this case. All right. So until next time, practice well, and don't forget you can call us or contact us at any time if you have any questions, and speak to you soon.